Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script, Season 3, In the Weeds, Episode 14, Personalization, Trigger-Based Relevance, and Core Static Relevance all together for a wonderful playbook. My name is Beck. I'm going to be your guide for today's session. If you do me a favor, if you go to flipthescript.co, on the left-hand side, click Free Sales Training Hub, navigate down to Season 3 and Episode 14, and download the deck. It's going to be for free. All you have to do is put in your business email, but it's going to be a really technical session, so I'd like you to have it along at each step of the way to follow along. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump on in. So today, I wanted to start by setting a bit of an agenda. So the first thing we're going to go into is the difference between personalization and relevance. Piece 2, we're going to go into relevance type number 1, which is trigger-based relevance or relevance based on movement. Number 2 or 3, we're going to go into relevance type 2, which is core static relevance, which is not based on movement. The fourth piece, we're going to go into personalization, the difference between that and relevance, and the 6 buckets of it. And then 5, we're going to go into how to combine all 3 elements, the three elements of personalization, relevance type 1 and 2 for a playbook if you want to do personalization. And we'll finish off for a playbook if you don't want to do personalization, what 2 elements to include and where. So let's get moving here. So difference between personalization and relevance. This is going to be pretty simple. Personalization, simply put, is one-to-one. Relevance is one-to-many. So anytime that you have there's been a number of different back and forth about what personalization is, in the industry, on and on and on. Personalization, as googly defined, is one-to-one. So anytime that I can send a message to Keenan and then I can send it to Daniel also, that becomes relevance because it is one-to-many, whereas personalization, I should be able to send it to Keenan only. So that's the difference from a high level. So I now want to go into relevance type number 1, which is relevance based on some type of trigger or some type of movement of the prospect. So to do this, if you would do me a favor, go to the written hub on the flipthescript.co website. And if you would download the one sheet or the comprehensive encyclopedia of sales plays, it's free. All you need is an email. And this will give you all of the different types of plays that you can run based on a trigger. So for trigger-based relevance, let's start off with category 1. So on the far left-hand side of that asset, you have inbound. And this is the trigger. You want to relevance sequence the people who hit the trigger of they became a hand raiser. So you have 2 different plays underneath that. People requested a demo and people who came in through, prospects who came in through the chat box. But essentially the trigger here is that they took some type of hand-raising action where they asked to talk to you about your product. The second type of trigger-based relevance is essentially what I would call postbound. And this is your prospect took some type of marketing action, but the marketing action was not becoming a hand raiser. So there's a number of different plays in here. This is one of the longest categories, but they downloaded content, they attended a webinar, they downloaded a free trial or a freemium account. Maybe they subscribed to a newsletter, or they follow one of your sponsored influencers on social media. But this is all the plays that you can do where they took some type of marketing action. They took a trigger. And so the relevance is all the people who downloaded content, all the people who attended a webinar, etc. So we're going to go into the playbook for that a little bit later. But this is the second type of trigger that someone could run into on trigger-based relevance. The third category, definitely the meatiest category, is going to be called bridge bound. This is the person or prospects who took some type of action, but the action is not in relationship to your marketing team. So there are 5 different categories under here. The first category, which is the heaviest, is going to be bridge bound based on relationships. So this is a way to sequence people according to they have some type of relationship with you or someone from your company. So they share a common VC, maybe they a play to go to referral to the network of your happy customers, etc. So we've got they engage with your C-suite's personal page or employees of your company or your VC partners. But this is all of the plays that you can run off of they took some type of trigger or movement action in relationship to someone from your company or you. The second category is based on a trigger, is going to be bridge bound based on history. So these are all the prospects who took an action and they have some type of history with you or your company. So there's going to be a number of plays in here, 16 in total. But this is, for instance, people who requested a demo but didn't schedule one. They agreed to a demo and then no-showed. Prospects who abandoned the chat. They went competitive and they're up on renewal. Maybe they customers who went to another company, etc. So this is the executive churn with user gems. For instance, there's a platform of how you can do this quickly. But these are all the plays that essentially the relevance is based on they took some action in relationship to you and your company. So they have some type of history there. The third type of category underneath bridge-bound is bridge-bound based on likely in market. They did some type of action that means that they are likely in market for a tool or to solve a problem that your software solves or your products or services solves. So a great example is they took an action or the market did an action to them. So a great example of the market did an action to them is time-based sequences. Maybe you solve problems for people when they're paying taxes and you have an annual event that happens that taxes are paid every April. So every February, it's a time-based sequence. Or maybe seasonal needs of HVAC units, for example, solve a lot of problems for people in Texas in the summer. So during the summer, you would have some type of trigger for something that put them likely in market for an HVAC unit, for example. But then you have a number of different plays where they took an action which makes you think that they're likely in market. So, for instance, maybe you found that they churned from your competitor, or they engage with a competitor's social media page. So it's likely to think that they are potentially likely evaluating competitors so that you can get in there and likely get evaluated alongside. So these are all the plays essentially that make you think based on a movement of the prospect that they are likely in market to solve a problem that your product or services solves. Bridge-bound category 4 is going to be based on symptoms, signs, pains, or problems. So this means that your prospect did something within the market that signifies to you that they likely have a problem that you solve for. So a great example of this is they have an overt negative output. So a great example is I do sales and SDR training to solve for the problem of low pipeline or low quality pipeline in terms of volume or in terms of quality. And so if I wanted to surface some great candidates as far as companies that might need this problem solved for, a great way to do that would be all the companies who are public who miss their revenue numbers within Q1. I don't know if they have a problem, but it's likely to guess based on that they have some type of problem that needs to be solving for. So this is a great way to sequence people based on the relevance premise that they took some type of action that makes you think that they have a problem, symptom, pain, or sign of something that you solve for. And then the last category here is going to be bridge-bound based on firmographics. So this is some type of trigger that the company took that would signify to you that there is some type of movement. So companies that IPO'd, companies that raised funding, they started hiring, they move locations, they release a product feature or a new integration. But this is some type of company move that issues them that you think they might now have the problem that you solve for. So this is going to be all trigger-based relevance, which is, again, there is some type of movement on behest of your prospect. So the only exception within this is outbound. The trigger here is not something your prospect did, but it's something that you did. So you put the prospect into a sequence and it made the decision to start to hunt after them. So number of different outbound plays that you can do based off of not tactically how you carry out the play, but who you're sequencing in the play and who the play is to and based on what. So there's a number of different ones in here that you make a play to the groundswell or the individual contributors to place a product for a free trial. So I worked with a dentistry company, for instance, that they would send over gloves and I had them send over the gloves to like dental hygienists to get them to use it and put it out on the floor. So it kind of caused that innate usage and desire for the product. Or CXO pass down play, you purposefully and intentionally over air to a CSO, or a CRO or a CMO, for instance, and you ask them to pass you down to the leader that you actually want to get a hold of. So point being, there are a number of different plays in here, 6 in total. Only one is typical traditional outbound. But this type of trigger is you took the trigger of putting the prospect into a play because you wanted to hunt them, quote unquote, hunt them. So that is all the trigger-based relevance. And again, there's 2 types of relevance, and relevance being defined as one-to-many cohort. So the second type of relevance is going to be core static relevance. So this is going to be they took no movement, but there is something that is statically, meaning without movement, relevant to this person. So if you want to go into this written hub again and download the 6 buckets of personalization, I cover all 5 types that I know of, but this is essentially what is relevant to them in terms of buyer persona, in terms of their company segment. So maybe they're SMB, mid-market, or enterprise, general business, for instance, their industry vertical, their geos, or their tech stack. But these are all the things that are relevant to them in terms of statically, so without movement. Personalization, pretty simple. It's one-to-one by definition. So the difference between this and relevance is you cannot send it to multiple people and it still be relevant. So this is going to be where you're going to increase your results dramatically. But there are 6 buckets to personalization. If you, again, go into the written hub and download the 6 buckets of personalization, I do an exhaustive breakdown there. But there are 6 buckets, and essentially they're ranked in terms of where you'll see efficacy. So bucket number 1 is where you're going to see the most results. And as you go up and down the list, the most results that you'll see in terms of the premise on that list is near the top, and then lower efficacy down the list. So bucket number 1 is going to be self-authored content. This is anything your prospect authored themselves. Speaking engagement they're a part of, webinar, article, or posts. Bucket number 2 is engaged content. This is anything that they engage with but didn't author themselves, commented on, shared, liked comments, or liked posts. Bucket number 3, self-identified traits. So this is their profile line, headline, or company line, anything that they wrote about themselves. Bucket number 4, this is going to be junk drawer. I always give the asterisk mark to if you want to see more on this topic, if I'd go into personalization point under the free sales training hub, and I go into this very, very extensively. I'm kind of going high level here, but I always give the asterisk mark that you're going to need to hook whatever the premise is to your company. So a number of ways to do that if you go into the personalization point training hub under I believe it's session 2, which is how to hook personalization to relevance. But this is all non-business related things about them: personal interest, volunteer experience, language spoken, school attended, etc. Bucket 5 is going to be background centric. This is anything about their professional background. So tenure at the company, professional trajectory between company, awards that they've received, boards that they're on, etc. And then the last bucket here is going to be company level. So this isn't technically personalization. It's not really a liquid. It's not a solid. It's a gel. Technically, you could send it to multiple people at the organization, but this is going to be the lowest bucket of efficacy anyway in terms of personalization. So usually I'm finding the lion's share, I'd say 95% of the premises within buckets 1 through 5, usually about 85 to 90 within buckets 1 through 3. But 6, I really only use or encourage people to use whenever, for instance, their prospects are based in APAC. So the APAC region, is much less likely to even be on LinkedIn. So company level is anything about that company in specific. So website language, posts, blog entries, news mentions, the dollar amount of their funding, if they acquire another company, hiring, made a key hire, etc. But the key here is you have to be specific. So you can't say, I noticed you were hiring. You have to, within personalization, you have to say, I noticed that you just grew 17% and have 3 hiring recs open for a VP of sales and sales enablement. So for instance, this has to be about a company, but it needs to be something that triggers your prospect is it to them in specific and couldn't have been mass blast. So those are the different elements between personalization, relevance type number 1, which is trigger-based relevance, and relevance type number 2, which is core static relevance. I now want to go into a playbook where you combine all 3 of those elements for a playbook if you do believe in personalization, and then if you are part of the dark side and don't believe in personalization. So let's jump in here. For the personalization, if you are personalization and relevance playbook, which I would highly recommend in most cases, unless you're selling, B2C, for instance. For the inbound plays, I would use the trigger-based relevance and CTA to book a time. I would not use personalization in inbound plays. The reason being speed to lead, and you're optimizing for time with the inbound leads. So, the trigger-based relevance, if they requested a demo, is good enough from my perspective. So personalization is going to innately slow you down to some degree. So speed to lead, speed to lead, speed to lead. So I believe if you go into the session on BANT and why it's a 4-letter word within sales, I go into a process that's faster than the typical qualification process and should drive 70% more results. But point being, if you want to take a look, but point being for the inbound line, I would use trigger-based relevance if they requested a demo only, and then go for a time they came to you. For postbound or bridgebound, which again is going to be they took an action that's non-hand raising from your marketing team, or they took an action that's not in relationship to your marketing team at all, I would use the trigger-based relevance of whatever they did. Reason for my outreach is I noticed you downloaded content. Reason for my outreach is I noticed you attended a webinar. Reason for my outreach is I noticed you attended an event. But more importantly, and then I would go into personalization. So reason for my outreach is I noticed you attended, an event, or you watched this webinar on personalization and relevance-based triggers. More importantly, I saw that you wrote this article on LinkedIn where you're talking about X, Y, and Z. And the second line is where I would give the hook to essentially whatever your value prop is, and an intertwined core static relevance by way of a question. So again, I go into this very deeply in how to hook personalization to relevance, but essentially you want to ask them a question of do a pattern interrupt, not to be an annoying, cheesy sales rep who does a play on words, but what are you doing to, increase engagement, like you mentioned in your article, drive more MQLs, and overall, bottom line business revenue as a result. So again, this is including core static relevance in terms of the business metrics that they care about within buyer persona or market, geo, or segment or industry vertical. And it is also paired along with a personalization, with a hook from the personalization to your value prop. Outbound, for outbound in specific, you have no postbound or bridgebound trigger. So the only difference here is I would include the personalization title or summary, and then give them double click on some type of excerpt. So you'll always have 2 pieces within postbound, bridgebound, and outbound. Postbound and bridgebound, it's the trigger-based relevance. You downloaded content, IPO'd, company funding, etc. But more importantly, and personalization. Within outbound, you'll have personalization only. So it's reason for my outreach is I noticed that you attended or love this article that you wrote on LinkedIn, especially the line where you went into X, Y, and Z, and then do the same second line as you would within postbound or bridgebound with the hook and the core static relevance. So I want to go into the playbook for relevance only, and then we can close out for the day. So the playbook that incorporates relevance only for inbound, it remains the same as a personalization playbook. I would do the trigger-based relevance if they requested a demo and then ask them for the CTA. The difference here is I would, for postbound or bridgebound, in the first line, I would use the trigger-based relevance. Reason for my outreach is I noticed you attended a webinar, on blank, blank, blank. And then you have no personalization. So in the second line, you'd go into the core static relevance. Pardon the ask, but what are you doing to, increase engagement rates across your website? Acquire more demo requests in the meantime, and drive more bottom line revenue for your org as a result. So again, there's no personalization in here. I would stress, especially if you are within a SDR and you have a more limited TAM. But in most case scenarios, personalization is going to increase 15x, 20x. It depends on the person. but your results in terms of response rate. So you can use a trigger-based relevance here. I try to lean on pattern interruptive language, meaning you aren't hitting the pattern of a normal sales email. Try not to use terms that are, this is kind of like asking me to say, like, how can I lose 30 pounds in a month if I don't want to change anything about my eating habits? I'm like, I can give you tips on how to do those sit-ups and how to do that running effectively, but really personalization is going to help you. But I would try to lean on pattern interruptive language where you're not saying things that most sales reps are saying, looking forward to it, just checking in, just circling back, just bubbling this to the top of your inbox. Happy Monday. Hope you and your kids are safe during these uncertain times, for instance. But in postbound or bridgebound, I'd use the trigger of whatever action they took. And then in the second line, go into a question using the core static relevance. And then the exact same thing for outbound, except for you have no trigger. So I would go into core static relevance right off the bat and try to be pattern interruptive. In the second line, I would ask them a question that is around the metrics or how you impact the metrics, the leading, leaning, and lagging indicators, and the problems that they typically run into in terms of a buyer persona. So in summary, I know there are a lot of different avenues that you can go in terms of relevance, trigger-based relevance, core static relevance, personalization. How do I intertwine all of them? But really, I hope the main takeaway here is you can automate a lot of things, and I would focus on the things and use your calories towards the things that you can't automate, which is personalization. So the great news about this is, I'm a big fan of Bill James, and what he did was he took baseball and turned it into, in majority, a science, and let the art be 5% of it, of the magic of the players. So same thing is possible here within sales of let's take all of the automation that we can off of reps and write that language and alpha test it, and then enable them to do the art, so to speak, and the magic of what it is to sell within that 5%. So that is everything. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this session and you want to see more, if you go to flipthescript.co, we have a myriad of different sales training sessions on anything and everything sales. And if you really like this session and you want to give us a little bit of feedback by way of a favor, if you go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, leave a comment there or tag me and Flip the Script and give us feedback on what you'd like to see more of in the future. But either way, thank you for tuning in, giving us the privilege of your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Watch out.